You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to buckeyegrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Good Monday, everybody. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio podcast presented by BuckeyeGrove.com. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb. If you are a first-time listener, as we are picking up new listeners all the time, welcome aboard. Of course, we are on BuckeyeGrove.com every Monday and Friday. And we are also on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and now Spotify. So there are plenty of ways to listen to us. Just pick the medium of your choice. Search for us. You can, subscribe. And then, of course, we always invite you to rate and review us. So the podcast will be boosted higher in the algorithm and more people will discover us. So I'm very glad you could be with us. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about coaching changes, staff or potential staff changes. We'll talk about Justin Fields, of course, picking the Buckeyes officially on Friday, as we suspected and had been rumored and anticipated that he would. Ohio State basketball also, I'll get into that late in the show, suffered a very disappointing loss at home on Saturday to Michigan State. And what can you say about that game? Ohio State had its chances. They have flaws, and you certainly saw many of them on Saturday. But at the same time, it's just like, despite the flaws, they were so close. They just didn't get it done down the stretch. Didn't have enough poise. Didn't execute the offense. Didn't get the stops they needed. The defense was not as good as it's been in the past. And some of that is, you got to credit Michigan State, because I said it on Friday's podcast. This Michigan State team, they weren't ranked as high as last year when Ohio State beat them in Columbus to restart the Big Ten schedule after the new year. But I thought they were playing better coming into this game. And when you look at how Michigan State's been playing, I think you got to tip your cap to Ohio State, and they did a good job keeping them in check and being competitive throughout that game. But you also just got to, credit Michigan State, because they are a really good team. So I'll talk Ohio State basketball, talk a little bit more about that game later in the show. There is so much going on with these coaching rumors, right? And yet there's absolutely nothing going on at all. There's just, it's crazy the number of rumors that are out there right now with regard to Ohio State's defensive staff, and will there be any changes? Will we see Greg Schiano stay or go? Tabor Johnson, will he still be around? Bill Davis, we haven't heard official word, but it seems like Bill Davis is gone. And it's so funny. I want to shoot myself for this, but my buddy Corey Thompson. Of course, you can hear Corey and Johnny Lunsford, co-hosts of the Scarlet and Grape podcast. You can hear them on this network, on the Unscripted Ohio podcast feed. Wherever you listen to us, you can hear them coming up now pretty much every Tuesday or Wednesday. But Corey, made what I think is a salient point. He basically said it's almost as if, there are a lot of rumors out there being planted by Ohio State to kind of, maybe kind of keep you diverted from some of the leaks. I've been very outspoken. If you heard me on WAKR in Akron over the weekend, I think that there is a lot of legitimacy to the Al Washington rumors. The Michigan linebacker coach, I think him being an Ohio guy, Columbus guy specifically, his dad was an Ohio State guy. He grew up in Columbus. I think that there is a lot to the mutual interest there, and I think there is a lot to the rumors of Corey Raymond of LSU being interested. I think there was contact, and I think that there is some mutual interest. I'm not saying that Raymond is taking the job, if he's even been offered one, but I think he's a name to keep an eye on. Matt House, for whatever reason, I called him Mike several times over the weekend. That's my bad. There's no bad press as long as you get your name right. So I guess that was bad press. But Matt House, the DC of Kentucky, there's Mike Tressel rumors floating around, the assistant DC up at Michigan State. Whole lot of names out there, okay? It is a wild smorgasbord of rumors when it comes to the Ohio State defensive staff. I can't tell you for sure what's going to happen because I think there are a lot of scenarios in play, and I'm not even sure Ohio State necessarily has prioritized all of these offers just yet. I think they're also kind of, they're waiting on what Greg's going to do, and then you might see a lot of changeover after that. I think it's actually possible. I'm not saying that this will happen, but it is possible when all is said and done that you could see the entire defensive staff gone, except for Larry Johnson. We know Larry Johnson will be back, but you could see theoretically the entire defensive staff gone. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, so don't quote me and say, well, Kyle said on the podcast that everybody was gone. That's not what I'm saying, but I think that is one scenario in play. So I think it all starts with Greg, because here's the thing. Some of these other guys that are out there, whether it's Mike Tressel or a Matt House or Marcus Freeman especially, or Al Washington or Corey Raymond, I mean, some of these might be contingent upon that assistant defensive coordinator label. Some of them might be full-on defensive coordinator. So there are a lot of dominoes that could fall based on what Greg Schiano does, and that's why I think that it's one of the reasons why you are not seeing a lot of finality with some of these coaching rumors, because it really hinges on Greg. I've been saying really since Ryan Day was announced as head football coach, taking over for Urban. I've been saying that I think Greg Schiano is out the door, and I don't think he's being pushed out the door. I don't think that Ryan Day wants him gone. I don't think he's being fired. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Day wants him to come back. I know Mark Givler feels that way. I think it's just a case where Ohio State would be okay if Greg left, and not anything against Greg. I think that they would be okay with the changes and just kind of getting a fresh start on defense. But I think there's also a part of Ryan that values Greg's experience and would value his input and his leadership. You can say what you want about him. I know there's been a lot of disappointment with him as defensive coordinator the last few years, but he didn't get to where he's at by being a dummy. And there is still some value. I think the catch here is that even if Ryan Day wants Greg Schiano on staff, the problem is I think he knows Greg probably wants to go out and do his own thing. I think he wants to take another job, take another opportunity, another challenge. And so even if he stays this year, how long is he really staying? His kids are out of school now, and that was one of the reasons why, he waited an extra year or two. He wanted to wait for them to graduate. That's happened now. So I think that Ryan knows Greg is probably going to be gone. So, he could probably put in the full court press and talk Schiano into staying another year. But is it really worth it? Is it worth getting him to stay even though he's probably got one foot out the door within the next year or two? And so I think that's where the issue lies. It's like, even if Ryan does want Greg to return, it just, you have to ask yourself if the juice is worth the squeeze right now. So just my opinion, I think that that's part of the holdup. I think that Schiano is going to be out the door, but they got to wait for him to decide what he's going to do for sure. I think Bill Davis is out the door. I think they're looking for a landing spot for him before they announce that. And until that happens, you're not going to hear any official offers, any official movement when it comes to replacements. But just recapping, this is just, again, my opinion. I think Al Washington of Michigan is a legitimate rumor that you should pay attention to. I think Corey Raymond is a name. I think Matt House is a name. The Mike Tressel stuff has been floated. I don't know if there's any legitimacy to that, but it is out there, and there are certain reasons it makes sense beyond the Tressel name and the Ohio State connection. I mean, he is an Ohio guy, so a lot of scenarios in play here. As I said, it's almost, Corey could be right. It's almost as if Ohio State is leaking a bunch of names to try to divert you away from the real names. I'm not going to give Corey too much credit there. I don't want to pat him on the back and give him too much of an ego, but listen to Corey and Johnny on Wednesday. I'll be interested to hear their take on this because they've got some interesting opinions. Sometimes they align with mine, sometimes they don't, but they're always well reasoned and well thought out. So I'll be curious to see what they think on the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Make sure you listen to that here on
Ross Fulton is here with his whiteboard to break down what the Buckeyes and their opponents are doing on the field. Can't see the whiteboard? Close your eyes and imagine really hard. It's time to go inside the X's and O's with Ross.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
So this is ordinarily the segment. You hear the bumper for the huddle, and promoting Ross Fulton, and that's usually followed by Ross Fulton. And in most cases, we also have, when we're breaking down the game from the previous weekend, usually Kirk Barton joins us as well. Well, this would have been the segment when Kirk and Ross joined me. We recorded a segment, and when I went back, the audio was terrible, and I apologize. I had some technical difficulties, and I tried to repair it. I just could not get it to a level that I was comfortable with people trying to hear. I promise you wouldn't have been able to make it out. It was inaudible. It wasn't worth it. So I'm going to spare you that crappy audio, and I apologize that Ross and Kirk were not to come on, because we actually had a great segment, I thought. We kind of reviewed the 2018 season. We talked about Justin Fields, and going in, kind of previewed the spring, what the defense is going to look like. Obviously without not yet knowing what the staff will look like. The quarterback battle, there was a lot of good things we touched on, and I'm sorry that I was not able to run that. Maybe if I can get it fixed, I will run it again on Friday, but I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on that. But I do want to talk about Justin Fields here for a few minutes, because after we waited and speculated so long, Justin Fields is in fact a Buckeye. He is now enrolled at Ohio State. He is transferred from Georgia. And so I want to discuss a couple of things. First and foremost, one thing that we discussed with Kirk and Ross in the segment that will forever be lost if I can't fix it, is how this impacts the locker room at Ohio State. Because I know there are a lot of people concerned, will this splinter the locker room? And, Kirk's opinion on this was that it can. He cited 2004. A lot of people will remember, Troy Smith and Justin Zwick. That quarterback battle was very heated, and he said that, you had players that did take sides. So that definitely is something that could happen here. But I will say, I think this is being overblown a little bit. Look, Tate Martell has not been done wrong. He's not been treated unfairly. Ohio State, the fact of the matter is Ohio State would like to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. As of right now, if we assume that Dwayne Haskins is in fact gone, which it looks like he will be, then Ohio State does not have the number of quarterbacks it wants on the roster. Okay, so it needed another one. If you're going to take another quarterback anyhow, why not take the best guy for the job? And the best guy on the market in this class, whether it be a freshman, coming in, or a transfer, that was Justin Fields. And obviously, whether or not he's going to be eligible will depend on the waiver. And I'm going to explain the waiver process. For those that haven't followed this on Twitter, and I made a post about this, a thread a few nights ago. If you didn't hear my appearance on WAKR in Akron, or if you did not see it on Twitter, or are not a subscriber to the Horseshoe Lounge on Buckeye Grove, then you probably still have some questions about the waiver process, and I will explain that here in a few minutes, and I will go over that. But, so as of right now, Justin Fields is not eligible, but if he gets eligible, then it's going to be interesting, because this spring, the battle is going to be, really fierce. But I don't think Tate has been done wrong here, okay? There's no reason to feel bad for Tate as far as, Ohio State, doing anything vicious or any, this was not an aggressive move. This is something that every major program should be doing. They should try to keep the same, their consistent numbers on the roster, and that's all Ohio State is doing. It just happened to land the best quarterback available in doing so. Now, I do feel bad for Tate from the standpoint that, he's getting so many questions about this, and, I can understand how somebody would be insecure about everything that's going on, having to deal with the questions, having to see this on Facebook, having to see it on Twitter. You got people tagging Tate every time they want to, chime in on the situation, how Tate's been done wrong, or how Tate's not acting maturely, and that's got to be annoying, right? If you're in Tate's position, I can understand how that would really get frustrating. You'd want to just lock yourself in a room, throw away your phone, and never go on social media again, and you bang your head against the wall and scream, because that's just really got to be frustrating. And I feel for him from that standpoint. It's not fair that he's being put in that position. Not by Ohio State. That's not Ohio State's fault. Again, they did what they should do, taking Justin Fields. But it's not fair that Tate has to deal with some of the ancillary things, okay? The social media reaction, the Tate taggers, as I call them. Folks, if you're tagging Tate on everything, stop. Please stop. That's probably annoying for him. It's certainly annoying just for a lot of people just to watch. They're trying to have a discussion, and, you don't want to try to have an honest discussion, and then all of a sudden somebody brings in, Tate, by tagging him on Twitter into the discussion when he had nothing to do with the discussion in the first place. It's just, there's no reason for it. Okay, it's not, you can talk about somebody publicly, it's not talking behind their back. You don't have to bring them in the conversation if they weren't in it. And so, please don't tag Tate anymore. I mean, that's got to be annoying. And think about if you're in his position. I mean, does he really want to hear all this? There's no reason for it. So, this will be an interesting battle. I think personally, and I've said this several times. I don't have any information, so I'm not predicting this based on information. But I think unless Tate is given the job after the spring, I think he's going to be gone. I don't think he's going to stick around for the fall. And to be honest, maybe they don't give Justin Fields the job in the spring, but I think he's going to be good enough that you're certainly not going to lose it in the spring. I understand that Tate has an upper hand here. Okay, he has been in the system. And there's certainly a talent level there. Tate has the arm. He has the athletic ability. He has the work ethic, seemingly, to be able to win this type of a job. But despite all that, I still think Justin Fields will win the job because I think he's the more talented guy. And I think with enough reps, I think he'll learn the system. He has all spring to do that. He can get caught up. And I think the physical ability, the talent level, is just going to show through here. And I'm not writing Tate off. But this is just a thing where I think Justin will win. And, I don't understand all the people on Twitter honestly questioning why Justin Fields wasn't the starter last year. Jake Fromm, the year before, as a freshman, stepped in after Jacob Eason got hurt. He took over at the start of the year. He wound up with a 160 passer rating, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 9 yards per attempt. He led his team to a national title game. So, with those numbers in mind, why wouldn't he be the starting quarterback this year? Justin Fields was just a true freshman. You got to remember, it's not often true freshmen actually win the job, let alone, beating out a guy that had just led them to a title game appearance the year before as a freshman. The 160 passer rating, I went back 8 years and looked at the championship games, and the 160 passer rating was, I think, third best in 8 years. That's out of 16 quarterback appearances. So Jake Fromm had a really good year as a freshman, and he backed it up. He took his passer rating out to 171 this year. He had a higher yards per attempt, better touchdown to interception ratio. So he actually had a better year this year. The aggregate yards, as far as yards per game, they were down just a little bit, but that's also because they had more blowouts this year, and you had Justin Fields taking some snaps away. So I think this will be, look, there's really no explanation needed for why Justin Fields did not start over Jake Fromm this year. It should be self-explanatory. You had a sophomore quarterback that had already had a year of experience that was really, really good, and he was really good this year. Justin Fields got an opportunity. He was good when he was in there, and he just wasn't comfortable anymore. He wanted to leave, and that's what he's doing, and I think this is going to be a really good fit for Justin Fields. I think it's really going to be a really good fit for Ohio State, and I think Tate Martell is capable of winning the job, but I don't think he will. I think ultimately Justin Fields is going to live up to at least most of the hype, and come fall, I think Fields and Baldwin will still be on the roster. My guess is that Tate will not. So real quick, this obviously is going to be contingent upon Justin Fields being eligible by the NCAA. I'm going to go down the process real fast, as clearly and quickly as I can. I'll try not to bore you with the details because I know this is really an administrative thing, but it's important to understand. So as of this moment, Justin Fields will not be eligible for Ohio State this fall. Okay, he's a transfer. The first-time transfer, he's going to have to sit out a year. That's just the deal. He won't be eligible until this time next year. But Ohio State then is going to be tasked with, it is up to them. It's not up to Fields or his attorney. And remember, Justin Fields is allegedly hiring the same attorney that helped get Shea Patterson eligible. And the attorney actually did not have much to do with that, and I will explain that in a second. But it will be up to Ohio State then to petition the NCAA for a hardship waiver. And the basis for this has to be basically circumstances that are beyond the student-athlete's control. In this case, and I'm not going to talk about it, but in this case, reportedly the reason that Justin Fields is going to be applying for the waiver has to do with this racial incident with the baseball player, calling Justin Fields a racial, a bad term, basically, okay? And that player has since been kicked out of school, so he was kicked out of the team and kicked out of school. So Georgia does not deny the incident happened. So Ohio State will file the petition. They're given a caseworker at the NCAA. The caseworker then is in charge with basically filing the case and taking it before a 10-person panel within the NCAA. And this panel is a 10-person panel that rotates among like 25 to 30 people. Okay, so they're assigned at random. The caseworker will communicate the case with Ohio State and keep them apprised of progress and the hearing itself. It is the caseworker and not the attorney, not Justin Fields' attorney. It is the caseworker that goes before the NCAA panel, and the panel will ask questions as to why this athlete should get the hardship waiver. And it's the caseworker that has to answer these questions and go to battle and fight for the athlete to get the waiver. In this case, the one thing that the attorney could be helpful with is getting the cooperation of the old school, in this case, Georgia. The attorney could help Georgia. They could sign a written statement to give it to the caseworker, and the caseworker could pass that along to the panel. But the attorney itself, although the attorney has no part in the actual process, they can be helpful in leveraging the previous school to help support the waiver. In this case, if Georgia supports the reason for the waiver, the racial incident, and it acknowledges it happened and goes to bat for Justin Fields, that would help Fields theoretically get the waiver passed by the panel. There's no guarantee that will happen even if Georgia supports it, but it greatly helps. And that's where Shea Patterson was ruled eligible and got the waiver with Michigan, because his attorney was able to secure the cooperation of Ole Miss, and that helped secure the waiver. So that's what Ohio State will do then. The caseworker will go before the panel. It'll argue, and then it's up to the panel after that. So any reports you hear after that hearing, well, Ohio State feels like it's done and they'll get, Justin Fields eligible with the waiver. I got to tell you, those are false reports, because the NCAA simply does not tell you. The caseworker will communicate with the school, and the caseworker can say, I felt like the hearing went really well. I feel confident based on prior circumstances, prior situations. I feel like this will get passed. You can have a sense of security or a sense of confidence, but you don't know for sure. It will take days, maybe weeks, probably months after the hearing. The panel will make its decision, and then we will know if Justin Fields will be eligible at Ohio State. Last year, at the end of April, was when Shea Patterson, with a similar timeline, Shea Patterson got the news that he will be eligible for Michigan this year, and obviously he did play this past season. So I look for a spring decision for Justin Fields as well. Maybe March, April, or May, most likely. That's probably when we will find out. So that is the process in a nutshell, and whether or not we find out if Justin Fields is going to be eligible as a possible starting quarterback for Ohio State next year. And then, of course, whether he beats Tate Martell out will be a whole other story.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
Before we wrap it up, I want to recap Ohio State's loss. I mentioned in the open, 86-77 against Michigan State on Saturday. So, look, the good news here is Ohio State, just 5 turnovers, which was a season low. Really good effort taking care of the basketball. And this is against a team that is pretty athletic, and they don't force a ton of turnovers, but Michigan State is a good defense, good athletes, very long. They tend to deflect a lot of passes, a lot of shots. So I thought from that standpoint, Ohio State was very, very effective. Look, in this game, you hate to lose a game where you only have 5 turnovers. Caleb Wesson was just outstanding. He finished with with 25 points, and on top of that, he had 8 rebounds. 25 points on 15 shots. That was just amazing. The problem is, he, like many other Buckeyes, got into foul trouble because Ohio State wound up getting called for pretty much every foul imaginable. Caleb probably had 2 or 3 just absolutely brutal calls against him, touch fouls that probably shouldn't have been called. He flopped on one of them. His 5th foul, look, there's no question he flopped. But the problem is the rulebook states that the rulebook does not account for a flop. Okay, it's not supposed to matter. The refs can call a technical foul on you if you flop, and if he had been called for a technical foul, then he probably deserved it because it wasn't a flop. The problem is Nick Ward, just on the very previous play on the other end of the floor, had done the same thing. He flopped when Caleb Wesson had contact with him, and there was no call. And then down on this end of the floor, there was very little contact whatsoever. Ward goes into Caleb, and then, Wesson flops and winds up on the ground, and then, 3 seconds later, the ref decides to blow the whistle and call a foul on Caleb Wesson for a block. And, this was just one of many, crazy calls in this game, and that's not why Ohio State lost. They lost because, they gave up 60% field goal percentage to Michigan State in the second half, and, they just couldn't get anything with their offense. They, showed a lack of poise down the stretch, some terrible shots. Dwayne Washington, Luther Muhammad, both victims of taking bad shots. Even Keyshawn Woods, who's been a staple of Ohio State's offense for several weeks, I thought took some bad shots as well. But Caleb Wesson getting fouled out, it was just, it was one of those games you feel like, Tom Izzo has so much impact on the officials, and he starts begging for calls, and he starts working the officials, and, they just, I don't know what it is, but it's just like a Jedi mind trick or something. Once he starts working officials, there's a perception around the league and around the country that he has an impact on them. And I don't even think it's, I think it's a subconscious thing. It's not that I think it's a conspiracy for Michigan State or anything like that. I don't think of, officials, Izzo has them in his pockets or something. It's not like that. I'm not saying he's paying off officials or they're, purposely trying to help out Michigan State. But I just think that he is so intimidating. He's been around so long. I think that his working over officials has a subconscious impact, and I felt like it took over the game in the second half. And it wasn't necessarily all pro Michigan State. I thought the effect of Izzo working the officials had more foul calls in the second half against Ohio State. And then by association, I thought Michigan State also got called for some more fouls that they weren't getting called for in the first half as well. So it wasn't just Ohio State getting these ticky-tack fouls, but I really felt like they were a victim of Izzo's working over the officials. So it ruined by Caleb Wesson being in foul trouble the entire second half with all these foul calls. It really ruined a game that was going really well for Ohio State because they were able to play the offense through him, and he was so effective. And when he went to the bench and not having around, on the positive note, having Kyle Young in there at the 5 made the defense a lot better. He's so versatile, and he's able to switch screens, and I feel like the defense flows better with Young in there. But unfortunately, not having Caleb Wesson on the floor, they just weren't able to play the offense through him. And down the stretch, even when he was in there some, and then he got fouled out, they could not get anything going. And I think some of that is leadership, but more of it, and I think most of it, is just inexperience. These freshmen and sophomores have not been through the battles enough and you can see their talent, and they will get there. I mean, when push comes to shove, they lost a game against a top 10 team to where they were really the aggressor and the better team for a better part of 30 to 35 minutes in this game. So if you think about it, there's a lot to really like about this. Muhammad and Washington and these guys are going to continue to get better. Jalen Leday, he is a very good, talented player. He just needs more time. It will get better for Ohio State. And I still believe by the end of the season, this offense is going to be playing a lot better. They are limited right now, and they lacked poise in this game, but there will be better days ahead. They just have to figure it out. The biggest disappointment for me is the fact that the senior leaders, C.J. Jackson was basically a non-entity in the second half because of cramping, and this has been an ongoing career issue for him. It's not the first time this has happened, and they've got to get this under control because they can't have him on the bench in a big game like this. He actually played well in the first half, 10 points, and was very efficient, took care of the ball. He was playing a really good game, but he wound up being irrelevant in the second half because of cramping. And then Keyshawn Woods, I mentioned him. Look, he's been a stabilizing force for Ohio State this year. I think he's been a little bit better than advertised from a point guard standpoint because he came in kind of as a combo guard. He was expected to give them a scoring punch, and maybe he actually has not been as consistent a scorer and shooter as they would like, but he's actually, I think, been better as a distributor. He's come in, he has a tremendous assist to turnover ratio, and he just doesn't turn it over much, and I think he's really gotten them into the offense a lot better than I think people expected, but he did not have a good game against Michigan State, and so they need Keyshawn Woods and C.J. Jackson, and of course Caleb. They need those three to be there every game, especially in this brutal Big Ten schedule coming up, because literally out of 14 teams, 13 other teams, excluding Ohio State, on a given night you're going to run into about 8 to 10, anywhere from 8 to 10 of those 13 are going to be teams that have a very good chance at making an NCAA tournament. The league is that deep this year. So they need Ohio State needs consistency out of Keyshawn Woods and C.J. Jackson. So we'll see how the Buckeyes do from here. I think this is a tournament team. I think it's a team that could still potentially challenge for the Big Ten title. I don't think they're there yet, and they may not get there this year, but I think they have that kind of ceiling, but they need more consistency. If they can keep getting only 5, get out of this with having only 5 turnovers in a game, they're going to be in great shape, because there's going to be nights where they don't shoot great, but there are other nights where they're going to shoot a lot better from 29% from three-point range and 43% overall. So we'll see what happens. Ohio State basketball, disappointing loss, but I would not get too hung up on this. This was a game where they probably could or should have. They just didn't hang on to it, and credit a really good Michigan State, a senior-laden, experienced Michigan State team for holding on down the stretch. That's going to wrap it up for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. As I mentioned, we've got Corey Thompson and Johnny Lunsford coming up on Wednesday with the Scarlet and Great podcast. Be sure to look for that here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. And, of course, I will be back on Friday with the next Unscripted Ohio podcast. I hope to have Mark Gibler on to catch up on some recruiting news, and we'll talk more about the coaching rumors and assistant coach chatter and figure out what's going on there with the Ohio State defensive staff. You can catch Unscripted Ohio every Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. As I said, you can also catch Scarlet and Great on Wednesdays. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and now Spotify as well. You can catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. I hope you will catch me on there, and feel free to hit me up. Basketball news, football news, Justin Fields, coaching stuff, whatever the case may be. Bengals, hey, Bengals, Reds, whatever. I'm a CBJ fan as well, Columbus Crew. Hashtag saved the crew. So anyway, that's it. Going to do it for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Everybody, appreciate you listening to us. Hope you have a great week, and we'll be back at you.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.